Welcome back to Sahara TV. My name is Rudolph Okonkwo. Yesterday, Ikemba Nnewi and the former leader of Biafra, Dim Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, was buried in his hometown of Nnewi. It marked the end of a life that was part of the Nigerian story. In some of his comments at the burial, the president said that Ojukwu is one of those brought by God to lead the people. He also said that, I quote, "I consider this burial my own burial." Our guest next is Dr. Innocent Odenigbo. He was a civil servant in the service of Eastern Nigeria in 1966 when suddenly he saw himself as the personal assistant to the newly appointed governor of Eastern Nigeria, Colonel Chukwuemeka Ojukwu. He worked with Ojukwu in the course of the events that led to the Civil War. As a witness to history and one of the few who worked closely with Ojukwu, he joins us to discuss the life and times of the former Biafran leader who was buried yesterday. Dr. Odenigbo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I assume that you followed the events of the past week. What is your impression on Ojukwu's treatment, how he was received during this funeral process?
I must say that indeed I was dumbfounded to see how the whole nation of Nigeria trooped out to pay him their last respects. It was wonderful. I couldn't hold my breath. I want to thank the president, Mr. Jonathan, for his courage in taking this decision. I know it wasn't an easy one for him to take. But I think it is something that Ojukwu deserves. Let's not forget that before Ojukwu became an Igbo leader, he was in the forefront of one Nigeria. Therefore, I think that burial was befitting for him from all angles.
Let me. For most of our viewers, they were not born during the war. So, for their benefit, could you please describe the man Ojukwu as someone who knew him and worked with him? Describe the man Ojukwu to our viewers who may not have that kind of knowledge about the Biafran leader.
All right. As you rightly pointed out at the introduction, I was a civil servant in Eastern Nigeria in 1966 when the coup of January happened, and subsequently Ojukwu was posted to Eastern Nigeria as military governor. I didn't know him before then, but as fate would have it, I was one of the few civil servants who were posted to the State House to work with Ojukwu as his personal assistants. Working with Ojukwu was a different thing from what we were used to as civil servants. It wasn't business as usual. 7 a.m. in the morning, the vehicle will come and pick you up, and you never know when you are going back home, sometimes 10 o'clock in the night. But you left the State House when Ojukwu's business for the day was finished. So he was a very, very hard worker. That's what I knew him even before the crisis actually started. And his personality is something else. You look at this man, massive in his structure, and when he is in his military uniform, he commands all the aura you can think of in the world. But behind that aura is a deep-seated humanity. I have many examples, many stories to tell you about to show his humanity. After the July, well, first of all, in May 1966, that's May 29th, after General Ironsi had conducted a tour of Nigeria explaining his policy of centralizing the government in Nigeria by the creation of provinces throughout the country. The Northerners, we understood, were not satisfied with a central system of government. But see what we are practicing today is the same centralized government that we have today in Nigeria. But the Igbos had to be killed for it. In May, after the killing, Ojukwu tried to gather himself and the Igbos together. The Northerners, some of them, apologized, especially the Emir of Kano, Alhaji Adebayero, who was, in fact, a personal friend of Ojukwu. Then he told Ojukwu, promised Ojukwu that the killings will not happen again. What happened? Ojukwu then advised the returnees, the refugees, to go back to the north and regard the killings as one of the prices the Igbos would have to pay for the idea of one Nigeria.
Now, Dr. Odenigbo, let me stop you there. We are going to get into that. I want to get a better picture of Ojukwu. I read a speech you made at this memorial that was conducted here in New York. Yeah. And in the speech, you told the story of how he came back from Oxford. Yes. And joined the civil service.
Oh, yes.
And while working as an assistant director, district officer, the governor of Eastern Nigeria then came. Can you tell us what happened during that visit?
Oh, yes. It was in Udi, the divisional headquarters. So Sir Clement Please, who was the governor of Eastern Nigeria then, rode in his Rolls Royce into the parade arena. There, Ojukwu and his boss were standing, waiting for the governor. The boss, who was Colonel King, as soon as the governor alighted from the vehicle, he put his hand up in salute. And the governor came, smiled, said good morning to Colonel King, and turned to Ojukwu and said, "Emeka, my boy." And Emeka replied to him, "Uncle Clem." And then at that time, the governor threw a friendly arm around Ojukwu's shoulder and led him away, asking him all sorts of questions like, "Where do you live? I want to see where you live. I want to know how you are walking." And so this man forgot that the district officer was still at attention until Ojukwu reminded him.
Yeah. So, now, why I asked you that question is that later on in the story, the way the biography, he was transferred to Calabar. And his late father, Sir Louis Ojukwu, called and cancelled that transfer because of some superstitious fear.
Yes.
And that led him to join the military. Can you explain to me how? Because if he had not joined the military, probably the history of Nigeria probably would have been different today. So can you tell us what led him to join the military?
Yes. From Mudi, he was transferred to Umuahia, from Umuahia to Aba. Then from Aba, he was transferred to Calabar. When his father, Sir L.P. Ojukwu, got the news that his son was being sent to Calabar, he was furious because there was at that time a kind of superstition around that Calabar women had a way of mesmerizing men and, taking them over from their parents. So Ojukwu couldn't stand for that. What he did was to pick up the telephone, ring the Governor General, who then contacted the governor of Eastern Nigeria, and that transfer was cancelled. Ojukwu was mad. Because here is the father he wanted to, leave. He left his father so that his influence would not work on him. But he found out that the long shadow of Sir L.P. Ojukwu was still pursuing him in Eastern Nigeria. So he decided that he has to join that institution where he felt that the influence of his father would not be of any use. That's why he decided to join the army.
So he joined the army, and then what happened? Because there was an effort by his father to stop him, to make sure that he wouldn't stay. Tell us the story of what happened.
Yes. When his father, Sir Louis, heard that he was entering the army, he contacted his friend again, the Governor General, and told him not to allow Ojukwu to enlist as an officer cadet. He believed that if he's not allowed to enter as an officer cadet, that Ojukwu will leave the army. He wouldn't like to join as a recruit. But he was wrong. He and the Governor General were wrong. Ojukwu went in, they refused him enlistment as an officer cadet. He joined as a recruit. Underwent all the training as recruits, went barefoot, did his exercises just like other recruits. And in fact, Ojukwu asked them, that's his father, asked the authorities to give Ojukwu the worst kind of tasks in the military. So he was consigned to washing the toilet with broken razor blades, scraping it to make it clean. And he was doing it. He didn't. They thought he would quit. He never quit. So at a point, his commanding officer, they said, "Look, I've had enough of this soap opera. Ojukwu, you must fill this form. You are going to be enlist as an officer cadet." That was how he was made an officer cadet.
Okay, let's go back to 1966 when he arrived at Enugu as the governor of the Eastern Nigeria.
Yes.
And you were there as his personal assistant.
Yes.
Something happened and the government house had to be evacuated. What happened and where were you guys moved to?
Yes. After the July coup, which overthrew Ironsi, between that coup and for 4 days after that coup, nobody knew what was happening in Nigeria. But on the 30th, we came to work. As we were sitting in the office wondering what was happening, the commanding officer of the 2nd Division of the Nigerian Army then, Major Gunewe, rushed into the State House, sweating all over, went into Ojukwu's chamber, and they discussed something. We weren't there when they discussed it, but later we heard that he asked Ojukwu that he must leave State House now with his staff. That those northern soldiers in his command wanted to come and overthrow Ojukwu in the State House. Ojukwu resisted the idea of leaving the State House, but the major prevailed anyway. So we moved down, took refuge at the police station in downtown Enugu at the Secretariat. A very tight accommodation, you know. We were there located at the top floor of the police headquarters. And from there, we could look down the street and see the sea of heads, people gathered, market women, market men, teachers, other professionals, everybody standing down along the street, looking up to that small building, looking up to Ojukwu. You could see in their faces that they were confused. They didn't know which way to go, and they relied on Ojukwu to tell them what to do.
Very good. Was Ojukwu reluctant to lead at that point? What was his domain? How did he react to that kind of environment where people were looking up to him to lead them?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it must have been the most trying period of his time. That time, because mind you, we didn't know what was happening in Lagos. We didn't know because for 4 or 5 days there was no announcement until say August 1st. We had the news chiming. We said, okay, maybe there's news to be heard. That was when Gowon came to do his announcement 3 or 4 days after the coup and said, fellow countrymen, we have pretended for too long. The basis for Nigerian unity does not exist. And we were looking at each other like this. What does this mean? Are they going to go away from Nigeria? Are they seceding from Nigeria or what? Nobody knew what was happening. Ojukwu didn't know. You see, that time everybody was confused, I must tell you. It was when, after 4 days of refuge at the police station, and arrangements were made between Ojukwu and Gowon after his announcement on how to repatriate those northern soldiers from the east to the north, that we came back. to us, to the State House, after they left. But they insisted we should give them guns. They carried 800 guns because there were 800 of them. They promised to send back the guns to that division. They never did.
Now, you wrote that you saw Ojukwu shed tears when his father died in the middle of the Nigerian crisis. Why would such a powerful man cry in front of his staff, and what did that tell you about him?
Rudolph, it was something out of this world for me and for the rest of us, his staff. His father was staying with him. He took ill. He was sent to the hospital at the Nigerian Cement Company in Nkalago, and that was where he died. So the day he died, Ojukwu was devastated, really devastated. And he was shedding tears. We never believed that Ojukwu would shed tears. And we all broke down in tears as well. So that showed me that behind that facade of military looks and toughness is buried a deep-seated humanity. Ojukwu is a humanist.
We know that based on the stories you also told that Ojukwu resisted pressure to pull the East out of Nigeria. Why was that?
You see, when people refer to Ojukwu as rebel leader, as warlord, as this and that, and to Igbos as rebels, it gets on my nerves a lot because it is based on ignorance of what Ojukwu stood for and what the Igbos stood for. Everybody knew that before those killings, the Igbos were in the forefront of one Nigeria. I stand to be corrected. Everybody knew that Ojukwu never took part in the January 1966 coup. That was why he was posted to the East as military governor. He wasn't part of the January 66 coup. He was always on the side of one Nigeria. So when people were pressing him, as I wrote in that my statement, all the communities in Eastern Nigeria were flooding State House after those killings, asking Ojukwu to pull the East out of Nigeria. But he resisted it. Number one, he knew the consequences of pulling out. It's not that Ojukwu was a fool. He knew the consequences of pulling out. And by the time he put the question to the Constituent Assembly, he made it clear to them that secession involved a lot of suffering. He made it clear to the people. But the people said, take us there. We are with you.
Now, I know that you were posted out of the State House before the Aburi Accord or the Aburi Conference. But the idea behind the Aburi Accord was to slightly pull the regions apart, to calm tempers and hopefully to make Nigerians appreciate each other. Now, why did it collapse? Why did the Aburi Accord collapse?
Okay. It was not easy to organize that meeting. You will understand, for security reasons. It couldn't have been held in Nigeria. So General Ankara, the then head of state of Ghana, put his country at the disposal of Gowon and Ojukwu to come to Ghana in Aburi and sit and talk over issues. General Ankara himself arranged for Ojukwu to be brought from Enugu, straight from Ghana, from Enugu to Ghana. So they met in Aburi. The sum total of the agreement was that Nigeria should have a confederal kind of association for the meantime, because Ojukwu convinced them, and it was true, that with officers of Igbo origin hunted and killed like this, it would be difficult for them to come back and become one again in one army, fight from the same trenches, eat from the same mess. He convinced them. They agreed. Everybody agreed and signed that loose confederation, which would have allowed tempers to cool, and then Nigeria could decide to come back into a federal system again. But When Gowon returned to Nigeria, Gowon in good faith accepted everything. When he came back to Nigeria, so many forces, number one, the British Commission didn't like the arrangement. Again, some permanent secretaries in Lagos worked against it. They advised Gowon, no. Don't you see? This is breakup. This is breakup. It's not a breakup. It's a confederal system. So Gowon, looking at it, once they advised him to throw it away, he threw it away.
I want to ask you.
Ojukwu was mad, and the Igbos were mad as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I wanted to ask you, while you were with him as a personal assistant, was there any discussion about the state of the country as it concerns the South, like the East and the West? Was that kind of discussion going on within the State House? You know, there have been some interviews where we hear someone like Sam Aloko saying that he was contacting Ojukwu and was the middle person between him and the people in the West. Was anything like that happening while you were there?
No, not to our knowledge, not to my knowledge at all. Okay. What concerned Ojukwu most, what concerned the Igbos most, was how to ensure the safety of safety of the life and property of Igbo people anywhere they are, and we were thinking about our own safety first. Now, I have no idea that there was a kind of a Southern solidarity or whatever. No, not to my knowledge.
Now, for over 40-something years after, when you look at Nigeria as it is today, what do you see? What do you feel? Do you think that there were missed opportunities, or what's your assessment in general?
Well, going by the kind of encomiums and glowing tributes paid to Ojukwu now by all parts of Nigeria, even by his enemies then, what I'm saying is that it appears that Nigerians are now ready to tell each other the truth, because our problem in Nigeria has been not being able to tell each other the truth. If we told ourselves the truth before, by 1966, there would not have been Biafra, there would not have been war, we wouldn't have lost millions of lives. But Nigerians refuse to tell each other the truth, and they tell the truth only when it is too late. But I still believe it's not late to mend. If we start today to tell each other the truth, I think Nigeria will still survive and be that beacon that it should have been in Africa.
One last question. Yesterday, the Governor Peter Obi of Anambra State said that the President Jonathan just ended the war by the way the federal government gave Ojukwu a befitting burial. Has that war ended? And did it end yesterday?
No, how can anyone say that? But it was a good beginning towards the end of the war. It was a good beginning in the sense that Nigerians seem to be now prepared to tell each other the truth. It cannot be the end of the war. Because why? Let me ask this question. Can Nigerians ever sit together and confer in an atmosphere of, friendship to say, this is how we're going to stay in this country, given our experiences, this is how we're going to stay and still remain Nigeria? I think Nigerians still have a job to do there. They still have a job to tell themselves the truth. The war is not ended, but the burial that was given to Ojukwu seems to be heralding the beginning of the end of the war. That's the reconciliation we have been waiting for the past 40 years. If it starts today, it's okay. We will accept it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Odenigbo, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
When we come back, we are going to talk to Mr. Clement Iloabache. He was a pioneer Nigerian Air Force pilot who later on went to the side of Biafra. He fought alongside with Colonel Victor Banjo They were the people that led the incursion into Western Nigeria. So we're going to talk to him about Biafra, about Ojukwu, and continue the discussion. And after that, we're going to take your calls and talk about what that means, the reception, the burial given to Ojukwu, what that means for Nigeria and for all of us. So we'll be right back.